everybody. Welcome to the Library Cultural Series, Remembering 9/11. This is Dr. Kelly Woestman from Pittsburg State University. She is a modern history teacher, among other things. And I just really wish you guys would give her a great big welcome. And also, sorry for the lateness. You know how if anything's going to go wrong, it will.
It just means I get to keep them an extra 15 minutes.
There we go.
It's Friday afternoon.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's Friday afternoon, so I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad there's a variety of ages out here because we've all got different experiences with this. I remember my first teaching job, and they're all like, "Oh, where were you when Kennedy was assassinated?" Well, believe it or not, I wasn't around yet, so I'm not quite that old. But one of the things I wanted to start with is I want you to think about how much life has changed since the pandemic started. Okay? Think about it. We had no idea when this all started in March of 2020, did we, what was going to happen? And that's the hardest thing to understand about 9/11. We had no idea what was happening that day. Oh, a plane hit a tower in New York. Oh, you know, I'll figure that out later. You know, we didn't really pay a lot of attention to the Middle East unless we were interested in current affairs or the history of that region. We sort of knew it was where our oil came from. And part of what I'm going to do is unpack some things for you, but I can't give you all the Middle Eastern history. We have played different roles over the years. You've got the CIA, the FBI involved, all kinds of different groups. One of the comparisons I always like to bring up is if we think about Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma City bombing, we don't blame all white guys. We don't say they're all like that. Just like the followers of Osama bin Laden are just a subset of a much larger group of people. Because as you know, a lot of students, even if they look Middle Eastern, I have a friend who was born in Georgia, and he looks just Middle Eastern enough he has to clarify when he flies, and he goes to the Middle East all the time because he can fit in. But he gets a lot of the prejudices too, and that's one of the things, both those of you in this room that work with students and those of you that are our students, it's let's learn what somebody's about, not just what their outside characteristics are. So, with starting this, let's see with going to see if this will play like it's supposed to play. Believe it or not, this introductory video is from the Transportation Security Administration, which we didn't have before 9/11.
American 11, are you trying to call?
The cockpit is not answering the phone. Our number 1 is in staff, and our 5 is in staff.
Hey, we're calling from Washington. Hey.
Oops. Do that.
Can you type backspace?
Backspace.
No.
I'll tell you what, we'll just go this way and just get a quick review. Let's start over. All else fails. No problem with directions. Okay.
American 11, are you trying to call?
The cockpit is not answering the phone. Our number 1 is in staff, and our 5 is in staff.
Hey, we're calling from Washington. Hey, our situation with American 11, the possible hijack.
What's going on there? They're back to that again. Ready, talk to me. Eddie, are you there? Eddie? Eddie? That's why this is the World Trade Center. What? Which is 1137?
It was.
What the World Trade Center talking to? Oh, God. Oh, my God.
United 175 here. We have some problems over here right now. And we might have a hijack over here too. Joe, this is on an airplane that's been hijacked. If things will go well, I'm going to go. I just want you to know I absolutely love you. I want you to do good. Go have some time. Thanks to my parents and everybody, and I just totally love you, and I will see you later. Yesterday. Bye, babe.
What are those people gonna do? All the elevators are blocked out.
Oh my God. So both towers are down.
Okay, come on, I got an aircraft southeast of the White House. Crystal City, just north of Crystal City. Just to the north of your town. Yeah, stop all departures. I just got hit. Don't put in a. Goddamn, I can't protect my NCA. United 93, go traffic 341 o'clock, 12 miles eastbound 370. Negative contact, we're looking at United 93. United 93, Cleveland, if you hear the sound right now. They got them hitting the top. We're waiting for these. You have the ball.
Tuesday, 9:47 a.m.
Hi, baby. Baby, you have to listen to me carefully. I'm on a plane that's been hijacked. I'm on the plane. I'm calling from the plane. I want to tell you I love you. Please tell my children that I love them very much. And I'm so sorry, baby. I hope to be able to see your face again, baby. I love you. Bye.
We're 56865. We have, I believe it is a Boeing 757. Can you see him up there, sir? That's confirmed. Looks like he's rocking his wings. Brother. He's rocking back and forth. We're 56865. I advise you stay away from that aircraft. Go north as fast as you can.
United 93, have you got information on that yet?
Yeah, he's down.
He's down?
Yes.
When did he land?
He did not land.
Oh, he's down?
Yeah, somewhere up northeast of Camp David.
Honestly, I just want to let you know I love you and I'm freaking so busy in New York. There's lots of smoke and we just wanted you to know that I love you already. I have a super social life. Maybe we're stupid in the job. We're not ready to die. It's getting bad. We're going to take sponsors because you're going to help each other get off the floor. Now.
Remembering this with hindsight, how many of you have a relative or a friend who's been over in the Middle East since all this happened to serve the country? A few of you, and we've lost, how about worked at the World Trade Center site? We've lost a lot of people that went to work. I know a firefighter originally from down by Caney, somebody I went to high school with in Carthage, Missouri. Her husband worked for the FBI when he was down there cleaning, and he died a few years ago. So we still don't know all the repercussions. They just identified, you may have seen this, a couple of bodies the other day. I mean, that's, and you know, we want more, when we don't know what's going on, just like with the pandemic, give me more information. Tell me what I can do. Tell me what I can't do. We don't know. We are still figuring all this out. We thought we'd be out of it by now, but guess what? Here came the Delta variant. And so when we look at what's going on here, is until this happened, if you were on a hijacked plane, the best advice was you go along with what the hijacker says, give them everything they want, and they'll let everybody go home. Right. Only one, based on what I've read, because you'll get different accounts on everything, only one of the people among the hijackers in each group knew what was really going to happen. The rest of them thought they were just hijacking the plane. They didn't know they were going to crash into a building. And when we look at this, as it unfolded, I can remember a friend was coming over, I was checking my email, and I saw the first tower hit. Oh, that's in New York, we come back in town to Pittsburgh, and people are lined up for miles to get gas, because the rumor is we're not going to have any gas. That was the biggest thing we were concerned about. And of course, this is all political, and we still don't know what kind of role the U.S. played behind the scenes. One of my favorite things that I have students in my Modern America class watch it. How many of you have seen the Tom Hanks movie Charlie Wilson's War? See, it's an old movie. It's got Julia Roberts in it too. And it's not exactly historically accurate, but it shows you how some of our foreign policy can be made. Basically, Charlie Wilson goes to Congress, 1980s, hot tub parties, cocaine, having a good time. He just collects votes, meaning he's like, I'll vote how you want me to on this thing, so that later on I can, say you need to come vote for me. We put the Taliban in power in Afghanistan. And look how fraud it's been to try to get out of that. And, I'm wanting to talk to some of the people I know that fought over there and survived, because how do you feel about there's no progress. We know that's where most of our heroin comes from, right? The poppy fields over there. And just like down in Mexico, you're not going to convince the average poor person not to grow what they can make money on. Doesn't matter right or wrong, whatever. But in looking at all this, just keep in mind that, think of all the people too. They just missed their plane, or they jumped on that earlier flight. The planes that they flew into the towers were full of gas, full of diesel fuel, I should say, because they would make the biggest impact when they hit the World Trade Center. Is why they chose. Because I'm like, why are they choosing? And I went through the Boston airport 3 or 4 years after, because we knew some of the folks went through there. You used to just pretty much walk on a plane. And some of you remember that. Now, even at the small airports, don't take your lotion, after one guy tried to do the thing with, setting his shoe on fire, you got to take your shoes off. And they told us, though, years ago, to be totally safe up in the air. You'd have to take 3 days at the airport to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do and doesn't have anything. And we're not willing to tolerate that. Look how controversial masks are right now. And it's become very political. This is obviously political because we're talking about Middle East politics. And you've got different approaches with Republicans and Democrats. But what you'll see if you get a chance to study very much history, they aren't all that different. They all go, when we see these guys in Congress fight, they all go to the same cocktail party in Georgetown that night. A lot of it's a show for back home and what's going on. Then you get, one of the neat things about Charlie Wilson's War is you see all the different actors involved. And if you got money, you can probably get something done. And that's where Julia Roberts plays the rich Houston socialite that says, I want this to happen. And Charlie's like, okay, you all get me elected. But it's always unintended consequences. When we went into wars like World War I and World War II, we had a goal. We thought we met that goal. People came home. Korea, that changed a little bit, but especially after Vietnam. Soldiers were spit on when they came home. And so with everything that's going on, and then the Middle East we were fighting in jungles in Vietnam. With this, we're fighting in the desert. And You also have probably read Osama bin Laden, that was considered the mastermind of the attack. We had him in our site several times, but no one was willing to pull the trigger. Well, he hasn't done anything yet. And we just couldn't imagine. You know, Timothy McVeigh was our first domestic assault where we got attacked really on our own soil to that extent, and that many people died. So keep in mind with this hindsight that, you know, and a lot of people, you may know somebody that enrolled in the military, enlisted in the military after we knew that this had happened. So if we go down to, there was a lack of communication that day. What have you heard about with the lack of communication that day? Do some of you remember what you heard? Police and fire didn't talk to each other, right? They were on different frequencies. Are they on the same frequency today? They're still working on that, right? Everybody, you've got Port Authority is a separate entity, which is where these were all down on that end of Manhattan. It used to be a swamp at one point, and they filled it all in. Who was in charge? Well, Rudy Giuliani said he was in charge, but everybody was all over the map. People in the second tower were coming down the stairs, and they told them to go back up because they didn't want him down on the street in the way. And then guess what happens? People went to the roof because they thought a helicopter was going to come rushing. When they built the World Trade Centers, they cut down the number of stairways and elevators by half. That obviously made a huge difference. And you have the survivor's guilt, the people that made it out, but nobody else in their company did. Cantor Fitzgerald lost everybody almost. Their CEO wasn't in the office that day. But that's what was hard for people, and to see all of that going on, and it's right there. And then you have the down, you know, the Pentagon is hit, and then the down plane in Pennsylvania is where we got the let's roll. And they figured out by then, there were, and see, people didn't have cell phones then. That wasn't that common. But there are people through the airplane phones that know, hey, they've taken, these other planes have flown into something. Where was that one that went down plane in Pennsylvania? Where was it most likely headed? Anybody remember?
White House.
Yeah, they were going to go for the White House. And where was President Bush when all this was happening?
In a school.
He was in a school in Florida. That became political because he's talking to little kids. His wife had been a school librarian. They lean over and say, we've got a situation here. And he's got to, doesn't want to get the kids upset. And then there's controversy. Some people in southeast Kansas saw Air Force One fly over on its way to Omaha. You may remember that. And they, I think it was Condoleezza Rice said it was the first time she had to scream at the president, you're not going back to D.C. One of the safety nets we have out here is we're not a big center of population where they can hit a bunch of us at one time. There's a good thing about that. I like to go places. I like to go to the country. I like to go to the city. I like coming back here. And when you see all this go on, it impacted everything for a long time. There's, you know, they finally got the new World Trade Center was. Think about how has the pandemic impacted offices? You have, you know, you have a big corporation. You have a huge office building. What's happened now? People aren't working there, at least not every day. And that's what, when they hit those towers, those were a big symbol of capitalism for them. We're going to get those towers, we're really going to get them. And they did. So, keep in mind, nobody knows what's happening for a very long time. And you know, it was like, I thought, oh, when the NPR was talking about the first plane when I was getting ready in the morning, I'm like, oh, they're redoing something on 1993, which we'll talk about in a minute. I don't know why we're going back to that. But we just never imagined for this that we'd get hit here. Okay, give you a little more information on communication back then. Most people didn't even have the internet. think about how ballistic or uncomfortable we go if we're without our phone for like 5 minutes if the battery goes dead. Think of all, I mean, there used to be, you know, a room bigger than this that took full of computers, mainframes, to do what our little phones do now. And you only use the internet, mainly people were watching TV and they were on the phone. Then what happened to all the phone lines? And the electricity in New York City, in the lower end there. But who remembers an iPod? So, you know, people now, what's an iPod? You know, take your music with you. I got 10,000 songs on my iPod. Well, the iPhone didn't come along till 2007. And even before the iPhone, I mean, you had some phones, they were in the car. I had one in my car when I was traveling in rural areas, just in case something happened. But I just paid the minimum, like, you know, $80 a month minimum since I was traveling by myself. And we just can't imagine now how different the technology is. If you called up somebody and ordered something online, you paid for it with a money order. Hotmail was the address we used at the time. Gmail actually belonged to Garfield the cat, that domain name. So it's just hard to think about. We just didn't have all these things. And so they've done, there's all kinds of places online now you can find, what was technology like in this year. So after the attack, we're going to take a look here and see what the internet looked like. This is just hours after 9/11. You can't get this on your phone in 2001. Most of them look, here's breaking news. Here's one of the places, these old chat rooms, which we think of as messaging now. And that, shows you, plane crashes. And this is just a small, these are geeks that are talking here, keep in mind, that are talking about this technology. And then most of the pages, like the New York Times and such, and CNN, they still look like a newspaper. Here's a few little hot links. Okay. New York Times looks a lot different now. And you didn't have a zillion links on every page either. You had, you had these few links, but that was pretty much it. So, now one of the images I want to show you, and this one is sort of hard to watch, but I think it's definitely worth taking a look at. There's an image called Falling Man that's considered an iconic image, and the person who took, it's a quiet picture. There's a small focus, and this is one of just many, but the photographer is going to tell you the story of it here. But this, I don't know how many of you have seen this image. It disappeared for a while, right after 9/11. And they never identified him. They think he may have been somebody that worked at the restaurant at the top.
I took an express subway train from Times Square to Chambers Street, which is the stop just before the World Trade Center. The first thing I saw was the two World Trade Centers. Both of them had smoke and fire coming from them. I just started making my pictures. I was photographing the burning building when EMT says, "Oh my gosh, look at that." And we started seeing people coming down out of the building. I instinctively picked up my camera and started photographing them, following them as they came down, until I photographed what has become known as the Falling Man. It's a very quiet photograph. It's not like a lot of other violent photographs from other disasters. There's no blood, there's no guts, there's nobody getting shot. But people react to it in a way that they feel that they can relate to this photograph, that they might have been in the same situation and they might have had to make whatever choice the man in the photograph made. You have to be very aware of your surroundings when you're in a situation like this. You have to be careful that you don't become a victim. Journalists don't run away from a falling building. We don't run away from the fire. We run to it because it's our job to record history. I didn't know I had that photograph of that man in that position until I actually saw it on my computer when I got back to the office. I called one of our photo editors and I showed him the picture. I said, this is it. This has got to be the picture. This man was like an arrow bisecting the 2 World Trade Centers. I woke up the next.
That was a long time. You know, he was on the FBI's most listed wanted terrorist, and he had participated along with some of his other followers in earlier bombings, including the 1993 attacks on the World Trade Center, or on the underground bomb that went into the World Trade Center. One of the main things that was different about how Osama bin Laden approached this was civilians are fair game. You know, when we would fight wars before, it was like, well, you know, some of the most controversial things out of Vietnam, civilians got killed. Well, civilians that were helping the enemy. So those lines get blurred. And he said that the Islamic world's in crisis, we've got to do something, and you know, declaring jihad or a holy war. And you know, there are just people out there that can get people to follow them. You know, Hitler in Germany before World War II convinced his fellow Germans that it was all the Jews' fault they lost World War I. If you can point to a common enemy, you know from your psychology classes, that can sometimes unite people. And then they believe the first attack that involved bin Laden was back in 1992 when a hotel, there was a hotel bomb and 2 people were killed. Now we hear about bombings all over the place. They kept expanding their reach. You know, the CIA's trying to figure out what's going on. And then you've got attacks at embassies. We know that Africa, significant portions of Africa become involved in all of these. So, but bin Laden is seen as the mastermind. If we can get rid of him. When they finally did capture him, his wife, he was trying to escape and his wife was screaming and crying. And it took Navy SEALs to get him out. Let's skip through a few more. Who were the hijackers? These are what their faces look like. They live mostly in Central Florida, Southern California, Northern Virginia, Northern New Jersey. They did things you do when you're traveling there. Rented cars, opened bank accounts, navigated complicated city streets, rented motel rooms, dialed each other from payphones, got their haircuts. They were around, and that's part of what we know now to look for, is people could be amongst us. They all used their real names. The ones that flew the planes went to flight schools. Only later did some of the instructors say, you know, they never learned how to land. But that wasn't their plan. Right? And the hiding in plain sight, that's why there's so much. You know, most of you are young enough, you can't remember. I just assume everywhere I go there's a camera somewhere. You know, don't do anything you're not supposed to be doing because you're going to get caught. And it may be the camera way over there that you don't even know about. You know, trying to explain to college students, you know, you're at a party doing your thing and somebody's taking pictures, guess where those pictures can show up? You just never know. So it's a whole different, you know, people my age and older go, glad we were, you know, young before the internet, before people all had all these phones. But basically they used the freedom our nation that provided us to destroy our freedom. There were all kinds of lawsuits afterwards. There were there were federal employees that got fired when they tried to stop some of them. And later on, there were people that worked what they had for security then that were like, oh man, I let him through. I thought it wasn't going to be a problem. So there was there's a lot of these cases. There was an FBI liaison to the CIA's Bin Laden squad at the agency's headquarters in Langley, Virginia. Working with the CIA, he learned about the arrival of the two primary hijackers as early as 2000. He pleaded with the CIA to pass the information on to their CIA or to their FBI colleagues across the Potomac. But he was told to keep quiet. You'll see hints of that in some of the dramas now. They were of the firm belief that their intelligence was telling me the next attack won't be in the United States, it's going to be on the other side of the world. We don't need to worry. The main thing about 1993, we had no idea that was a preview of coming attractions. On February 26th, 1993, you had two men drove a yellow Ryder van into Lower Manhattan and pulled into the parking garage. They didn't do a whole lot of damage, not as much as they could have if they had been just a few hundred feet over in a different part of the garage. They would have gotten the structural support. What we didn't know is they're not going to give up this easily. And look, 2001's not the next year. And so they talked about how they took care of the people, and it was a big loss of power was the inconvenience most people knew about, which meant you couldn't watch your TV, and the TV stations couldn't broadcast. So what they hoped with that bombing is one tower would fall on the other, but they were designed to fall straight down, because you think about how far they would go if they fell over to the side. National Geographic has some of the best specials about 9/11.
Just before 10 a.m., a call comes through from the Vice President.
I could hear a noise on the phone. I looked around, and I could see the desk in front of me was shaking. I didn't know what that was. Things flying through the street, things hitting the side of the building. And then all of a sudden it became dark outside. It went totally dark outside.
Okay, think about what's the other contaminant that causes a problem for people? What are there millions of, maybe not quite millions of in the buildings? Light fixtures. Had mercury in it then, because of when they were built. And so that was another thing about dealing with all this waste and where it went. Impact on the travel, planes were grounded until the 14th of September. And one of my friends at the time that worked at Southwest Airlines, a few of the pilots said, you know, we've actually been on duty for 4 days. We're not flying home. And that's when Herb Keller still ran the airline. He goes, that's fine. You don't have a job anymore, because he could do that. And now we're trying to get back. I've got a cousin whose husband flies for Delta. And I said, how's he dealing with all these angry passengers? That scares me more than getting the Delta variant on a plane. He goes, he tells the flight attendants he has their back, and if he has to get involved, they'll be greeted by police when they land, which tends to calm people down a little bit. But we have Department of Homeland Security, and it's just a lot more hassle. You know, the Kansas City airport, if you've flown out of it, it was originally designed, they're finally redoing it now, where you could drive up and drop somebody off at their gate. That became a real problem after this. And that's why they're trying to redo, because I can remember there was a long time there were no bathrooms behind security, so you had to really time it right in case your flight was delayed. But those are part of everyday life. I've got some more pictures I can show you, but you guys have been great, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you have or any comments you want to make. But this is just a small slice. There's all kinds of things online you can take a look at. Again, just look at what the source says. But I really like what National Geographic, and you think about all the stuff that Discovery's been doing. And I like to give credit. How many of you know who Bill Curtis is that's from down around Sedan, Kansas? Okay. He made his name with Tornadoes in Topeka, a broadcaster. If I showed him to you, you would probably recognize him. But on A&E, 25 years ago, he started a series of shows called Cold Case Files. What have we got all over now? He started stuff that became the History Channel. Now he's doing this primarily out of Chicago, but his family money is helping save the original Little House on the Prairie site. But I always think it's interesting to find these big connections. But we have more of that broadcasting because, you know, and it's cheap, you know, just like the reality show. Somebody's complaining again that Big Brother's rigged. It's like, you know, what did you think was going to happen? But it's a lot cheap. Those shows are a lot cheaper than paying big stars. But anyway, thank you for your time, and I'll take any questions either individually or as a group. So, yes, sir.
Were 2 attacks there the only attacks on the World Trade Center?
Those were the 2 biggest targets. I'm not sure unless somebody else knows. I know that some of the debris took some of the other the shorter towers down that day. So, but those were the 2 symbol, you know, then the Pentagon and the White House were on their radar as far as we know.
Well, planes have hit the towers before, but they were small.
Yeah,
they were terrorists.
Yeah, they were, and that's what they thought. Oh, another idiot pilot's flown into one of the towers. They had no idea it was a 747. So. Yeah. Oh, yes, sir.
I have 2 questions. First of all, you said that some of the participants, or terrorists, did not know they were not going to make it. So, if I assume that the people who went to flight school and didn't know how to land do.
Yeah, that's, and again, there's a lot of unknowns because we can't interview them.
Okay. So I was to say, so how do we know that some of them were not aware that this was going to happen?
From the intelligence that they would have never gotten, 3 to 5 on a plane that would have agreed to that. They could get 1. So, okay. But that's sort of one of this is what we think from the intelligence we have. Okay. Think about if we all saw a car accident out there, we'd all have a different story, right, about how it happened. Yeah. That's the hard thing.
Well, the second question is, there's not enough attention that paid to the significance of the date. Because in the Islamic world, that was the date of Jan Sobieski's defeat of the Ottoman Empire at the Battle of Vienna, and that's what considered Islam began to retract from the world. So clearly, that shows that part of the world has a long memory, we do not.
Yeah,
1683 we're talking.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point to make, and that's what another Timothy McVeigh comparison is. Did Timothy McVeigh go in with the truck that blew up in Oklahoma City in the Federal Building? No. He spent some time in Pittsburgh on his way between Junction City and Oklahoma City. But most of terrorists that we're familiar with don't kill themselves in the process. That was what was so unusual, and that's a good point. This is what we think we know. And unless you can, you know, the people that live through this, you know, and one of the interviews I listened to on the radio over the last few days is there are people who lost a loved one in the World Trade Center, and they're down there all the time because that's their way they can sort of be with their loved one. And they'll talk to you. I mean, unlike what you hear about New York, people got a lot friendlier after this. But they want to share their stories, and then, and just not, and that's a very personal thing, when you can't find remains to bury, then it depends on your, you know, a lot of religions believe you're just going to be wandering until they find your body. So, but we don't want to forget that's what happened. Your political leanings are going to help determine what you think about current restrictions on our freedom, but, you know, that's the main thing I try to do as a teacher is to try to get my students, you need to judge each person not by what they look like on the outside, because you just don't, you know, you just don't know. And that you need to get more information, because that's a problem now. You guys that are young enough, you just get news blurbs. You get little clips. Say, go hear the whole thing so that you know the context of it. But anyway, anybody else?
Well, I just had a comment. When you said about that, you know, they just identified those two bodies, I read the article, and I can't remember, but I mean, it was well over 1,000 people still have not been identified.
Oh yeah, there's.
You know, I mean, I was thinking, you know, well, they probably have it down to less than 50 by now, and it's a significant number. I was just shocked by that.
Yeah, it's. You think about how, I mean, the bodies flew all over the place. I mean, you've got a part here and a part there, and you know.
But I remember seeing that, you know, they were dividing out the rubble from body parts, and you know, we're going to do DNA, everything, and that never really probably happened.
Well, look at the advances in DNA. That's how we've caught a lot of people now. If you ever commit a crime, watch who's following you around, because if you throw something away, it's fair game. But that's part of the issue too with, you know, all the cold cases. Everybody's like, why are they still working on this? Well, there's been a few murders since then. Yeah, so anyway, but good observation. Anybody else? Thank you very much for your kind attention. And have a good rest of the semester.